What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Last week we were taking some parts for our Chevelle over to the paint and body shop while they were painting our 1965 Godzilla swap Continental. They are just about ready to swap out these two projects. Also, we just got back our 1967 Continental back from the sandblaster. While we're waiting for all these projects to kick off, we got something super special in the shop. We got our 1923 REO Speedwagon. This thing didn't exactly show up to the shop all disassembled like this. Matter of fact, it came on a flatbed. So in this episode, we're gonna see if we can get this 101-year-old engine to fire up. So let's take a flashback and see where it all started. All right, guys, it's Monday morning. The shop is full. I just moved a bunch of stuff around because, as you hear, there's a tow truck backing up, and this is something special. This is something I've never seen, we've never touched, it's never been in our shop. 101 years old. 101 years old. Happy birthday. We got a 101-year-old 1923 REO Speedwagon. Freaking wood wagon wheels, man. This is a buddy of mine. His dad and he were working on this project. His dad unfortunately just passed away on Christmas Day. He wants to get it back running and get it done. Called me up the other day, went and took a look at it. Of course, I'm gonna take the project in. I mean, to be able to work on a piece of history like this, I think is humbling, and we're down for the task. So let's get this thing off the tow truck. Let's get in the shop and let's see what we got. All right, she's in the shop, man. I'll tell you, this thing is really not in that bad a shape. Our first goal is to get this motor running, and then we'll take it from there. I've never worked on a motor like this. It seems pretty simple. Everything's kind of there and open. So yeah, we'll get this thing running. Then we'll assess kind of like the safety issues and get it roadworthy, you know, like headlights, make sure the brakes are working. Hopefully he'll let us restore the whole thing, because that's the goal. I want to be able to restore the wood, all this paint stuff, the upholstery, you know, redo the wheels, missing a running board. Looks like we got a lot of parts in here, so I'm sure parts for this thing are not going to be easy to find. Let's get rocking, man. Comes with a cool little lantern too. Here we go.
Well, Dave's got his gas tank off. Next thing we're going to do is just bar the engine over to make sure it's free. We check the fluids. Needs coolant, and what's neat about these is, believe it or not, they had like its own dipstick on the outside. So you filled your oil in there, and then check the float, the level to wherever the level is. Thought that was pretty neat. The other thing is the whole crankshaft is embedded inside this engine, so there's some covers on the other side where you had access to your journals, your main caps and all that, and you could actually adjust the mains. And the wrist pins, from what I read, they're hinged, so it's only one bolt and the cap opens like a hinge. But enough of that. We're going to see just this engine turns over a little bit. All right, so I barred the engine over freely, no resistance, nothing binding up. One thing I did notice is these rockers were a little loose, and I noticed these are different. This one does not have a cotter pin like these two, and this one additionally has an extra jam nut on it. So I want to do a little research on that and figure out if we're missing a nut or a washer or something. It's basically a taper bolt. Prevents this thing from moving around too much. Alright, so I went ahead and broke all the lock nuts, loosened our push rods, and I decided to just find at least two valves that had a similar clearance. I measured about 1/8 thou with a go no-go gauge, so I'm just going around and tighten these, adjust the clearances on these. This one was around 70 thou on this one, and this one was somewhere around 50 or so. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust those and check the exhaust valves afterwards. So we cracked open a couple of the drain plugs and just to check for any water or anything, and we did find some sludge, some coolant mixed in the crankcase. So we opened up these covers here just to see what the inside looks like. Next thing we're gonna do is start by checking the electrical system, drain some of the rest of this sludge out, and go from there. We got our battery hookup and no sparks. That is badass right there. That's the horn I need.
All right, so we have our fuel system hooked back up here with our filter, our tanks back up, and we tested the starter and the motor turns with the starter. So our next step is going to be filling up the gas tank with some gas and leaded substitute additive. Then we'll open our petcock on the gas tank, open the petcock on the carb, and make sure we prime everything gas down to the carburetor, and then we could really see what's going on. All right, so we filled up our gas tank, but this was leaking. All of our fittings are cracked. This was covered in JB Weld. Somebody tried to repair it at one point, but it was not holding fuel well enough for us to use. So instead, we've made the funnel gas tank, attached our fuel line to the bottom of this funnel, and it goes down into here into the carb. So at least this way we can test things out and not have to worry about what we're gonna do with the fuel tank just yet. So we'll see what we can do to restore that thing. So we do got fuel to the carb. We open the petcock, it pours out. Our next step is to fill up our little fuel cups here. We crank it over and see what happens.
We're out of gas.
Yep, but it works. Hurrah. Okay, well.
They don't make them like they used to, Dave.
No.
All right, so we got our timing cover off here. Just kind of take a peek inside, make sure the whole front gear train's all copacetic. And as you can see here, it's all corroded on the front face of this gear. We're essentially passing down here, dripping down. You can see where it puddled it down there, just basically filled up in the rest of the crankcase. So we're gonna clean off the face of this, and we're gonna get some oil in this thing to grease the rest of this and clean it up. So we ran about 6 cans of some 2+2 in our crankcase. We got all the sludge out, including our, this is essentially our filter here, our screen. This thing was completely clogged. This is where the oil pump, the piston travels through and basically kind of drips all the oil onto the gears. Like there's one tube there and you have a series on each connecting rod. So we got all that cleaned out. I'm gonna put some oil in this and essentially just turn it and kind of prime it, start getting some oil and fluids flowing through this thing. How many gallons? I have no idea.
All right, so we've spun this motor over and we can't get these oilers to start oiling. There's like little tubes that come out here and inside that when you spin, there's an oil pump driven by the cam. So this cam, you're off this gear right here, and it pumps up and down, up and down. So we're gonna have to disconnect a whole bunch of stuff. This coolant manifold, this intake manifold, and the exhaust manifold, get these two heads separated from each other. Then we'll be able to pull our giant bolts down there, kind of like our head gasket bolts, I guess you would describe them, and then be able to lift this head straight up. That way we could get straight down into the motor and be able to take out our oil pump. So let's get all this stuff off and then pull our head, get our pump out, and we'll see what's what. All right, so we're still working on the oiling system here. We've blown out our lines and got them all clear. Before we put oil back in this thing, there was another piece that was broken, and that's our level meter. Here it says empty and full, a little dial. So as you fill up the oil, there's actually a mechanical float right there. And if we dump in the oil, it's so oil soaked that it doesn't push up the dial at all. So we need to figure out something to replace it with. It seems like that might be like a piece of cork or something similar.
Yeah, it's essentially a wine cork.
But we asked Mike if he had something around, and he gave us this stress squish ball, and I've soaked in oil, and it seems to float right on top. So we're gonna try and just experiment. Okay, so we got our oil pump, I guess what would you say? Our plumbing back inside?
Yeah, plumbing back inside.
Yep, and our housing that our piston actually runs through. You can see it
Right in there.
right down in there, that brass boy. It actually pumps oil. So our next step is that we're gonna raise the motor back off the table so we could put this piece in. This goes underneath. And then
it's kind of like that.
Yep. While it's in the air, we could spin the front with a hand crank and make sure that our oiling system is going to work actually inside. Let's see if it works. Yeah. Give it a little spin. All right, now we got the inside of our motor all cleaned up. We now need to get the outside of our motor degreased and cleaned, all the loose paint off, so that way we can repaint this entire block. So we have it strapped to our table here. The table's got some wheels. We're gonna actually be wheeling this whole thing outside, and that way we could hand spray with degreaser, hose down the table, not make a giant mess inside the shop, because as you can see, there's a lot of grease to be degreased. All right, before we go ahead and reassemble and put our motor back in, we're gonna get all this area cleaned up because we're gonna do some touch-up paint as well in here. But of course, this is also very greasy. So we're gonna pull it outside, spray it down with a bunch of degreaser, get the pressure washer, and go to town on the front frame of this thing. All right, we got our engine bay here all cleaned up, and now that's nice and degreased and painted. We got also a nice painted degreased motor ready to go back in, and we got a table full of accessories to bolt to it that have all been gone through, either polished, painted, contacts cleaned off for the electrical components, etc. Now's the time. Got our engine hoist, gotta figure out how to strap this guy without destroying our new paint job, and then get it set back in so we can start building it up. Okay, we got the motor back in. We got our motor mount bolts all tightened up. Right, they're all tight? Maybe?
Yeah.
Now Brady's working on putting our clutch assembly back mating to our pedal.
Gotta get it back on that plate.
Yep. And then we have our table full of shiny, refreshed parts. And we're gonna start throwing these back onto the motor one by one, build it up, and then we'll get this thing running again.
So we got our carburetor intake set in, all our rockers fixed. Next thing we got to do is do our valve lashes, and according to the book it is 5 thou across the board.
Watch your face, yeah.
We made a bunch of adjustments with our carb. We took this whole assembly apart. There's the check valves inside and our float that then cuts the fuel off. All that stuff was kind of gummed up and not letting fuel in, so we cleaned that out, got that fixed. Brady also adjusted this linkage, which was put on incorrectly, and now it has an actual screw, adjustment screw here for the idle and throttle. And what else did we do? Oh yeah, we rechecked our timing as well to make sure we were firing when our both our valves were closed in the correct firing order on our distributor. So as you can see, everything's been touched on this motor. We took it apart. We fixed the oiling system, which was not adjusted correctly, so now the internals are getting oil as the oil pump gets drawn up and down with the cam. We took off all the parts, either painted or refinished them. redid all of our seals. And the one thing we were waiting for to actually drive this around is our water pump cover had a hole in it. So we had to re-weld it, and now it's being painted. So once that's dry, we could reinstall that, make sure that doesn't leak, and then put the radiator in. So while we're waiting on that to dry, we're gonna get our bench seat put back up here, and that way we're prepared to take it for a little spin around the parking lot. But first, let's get this thing started, make sure it's running smoothly.
Sound the horn, Dave. All right, ready?
Let's see. Does it help when the ignition switch is on too?
I know. All right, let's see what happens. Ready?
No choke. A lot of flames going on.
Brady and Dave were actually able to get this engine fired up. There's still a few tweaks going on. Andrew, what's going on over here, brother?
Right now, the engine was running pretty poorly, backfiring out of the intake and the exhaust, which typically doesn't happen from fuel delivery problem or ignition timing. So we took the timing cover back off the engine to verify our mechanical cam timing, and it looks like we're some teeth off. So we're gonna rectify that, get the timing for the cam and crank synchronized properly, put it back together, fire up the engine, and we should have success.
You heard that, success, man. So hopefully we'll be able to get this thing running and actually outside rolling around on these wooden wagon wheels. So that's pretty cool. All right, while the boys are getting this thing mechanically sound, I'm gonna be putting my attention over to the wood framing and the bed of this truck. This thing's actually got a lot of story to it and a lot of history. So if you guys wanna hear about some of that stuff, as well as seeing this truck rolling around on these wagon wheels and seeing some cool carpentry, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, so you don't miss out on this project, as well as all the other cool stuff we got going on. So we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Peace.